I've heard you have a test today. मैंने भी अभी सुना. आप लोगों का पता लगा? लिख लोगे ना कुछ थोड़ा बहुत गवर्नेंस के क्वेश्चंस पे भी थोड़ा दिमाग भी अप्लाई करना, बिकॉज जितने आंसर्स मैं चेक करता हूँ उसमें मैं कुछ भी क्वेश्चन दे दूँ, आप लिखते नोट्स में जो है वही हो. मतलब FCRA का कोई लेना देना भी तब भी उसको कहीं ना कहीं घुसा दिया. So please make it a point that you address the demand of the question and not what has been given in the notes. Okay, notes are for you to refer because they are the topics which are given in the syllabus. But then, as it is, things will not come in the exam, right? This is just for you to prepare. I mean, if something comes from the notes, that is very good. You will be able to use a lot of things from the notes. That is okay. But you can't just exactly reproduce the notes, right? You have to understand the demand of the question and write as per that. Like I was reading some of the answers, I've checked all of them, I'll just distribute. There was a problem that some of you have given good suggestions also, okay? That how can these environmental NGOs and all can be reconstructed to do better work and all that, good suggestions. But in the constraints part, you have given constraints of your suggestion only, right? So if you said that app-based thing can be done for the NGOs for approval and this and that, that's a good suggestion. But in the limitation where you had to write the limitation about the environmental NGOs and not the ones which you have given or the suggestions you have given, you're writing lack of internet penetration. So don't do such thing, like understand the demand of the question. If there are three things which are being asked in the question, divide them. This is the first part, this is the second part, this is the third part. I mean, there is no harm in doing this, just writing the first part of the question, giving it a heading and then answering it. Then second part of the question, giving it a heading and answering, so that the examiner also knows, or the person who is checking, that you have addressed the entire thing of the question. That is the first aspect. Second is to actually write what is being asked in the question. That is very important. Maybe you guys have just started to do the writing exercise. Slowly, gradually you'll understand, and limited knowledge is there at present. But questions will want knowledge from all sides of the corners. Okay, but you guys will manage. Okay. So where were we in the last class? Civil services. Okay. So we were doing civil services in the last class. We had discussed the role of civil services in India, how they are categorized, what is the three different types of services, all India services, central government services. After that we had discussed why the civil services in this all India service structure was created, what was the intention behind it, the historical background, what are the present day advantages, what are the present day limitations. Okay. So this was a brief idea that you should have about civil services, though they may not ask you directly, but this is a kind of a evolution that you may use in your essays or somewhere. You have to know all this. Okay. Today we will be doing two important topics. One is reform in civil services and the other is lateral entry, the very hot debated topic. Okay. Before that, I want to give you some things which you can use in your mains answer and all, although not many of you are writing mains. So I had the opportunity to attend a felicitation function yesterday where the Honorable Vice President was also there, and in his speech he said certain things which I felt very useful, so I noted down for you guys, and they can be incorporated in the answers or somewhere, because this is an official statement and you can even quote the VP himself. Okay, so just write down. So give the heading development. Development. So in this he said that the Honorable PM has given a three-step formula. The Honorable PM has given a three-step formula. For the executive and the bureaucrats. This is the three steps are reform, perform, and transform. Okay, so reform basically whatever is there in the present scenario, perform to the best of your capabilities for the ministers and the executives to implement whatever is there, and whatever has to be, new policies that have to be made. And the final is transform. That is, after reforming and performing, you need to transform the nation. So these things may not make much sense, but they look very good in your mains answers and essays, especially when they come from a government source. Okay. Second thing he said about development is development in the true form. Development in the true form will be there when development, within quotes likho, development reaches unreached, the unreached. Development reaches the unreached. Development reaches the unreached. Funding reaches the unfunded. Funding reaches the unfunded. And recognizing the unrecognized. So this statement was given by the Vice President himself. So this is very self-explanatory, that it is very important, like we had already spoken about integrating the weaker sections as well as the marginal sections into the mainstream. So true development or inclusive development, which we call, or inclusive growth, can only happen when the development reaches the unreached. The funding mechanism which we always discuss, microfinancing, MFIs and all those things. So that funding, when it reaches the unfunded, because the people who are already getting funds, they continuously getting more funds is not the objective. Even in the case of subsidies, we often see that the rich farmers always take the benefits, because the person who doesn't have, a pump at his disposal or a machinery for agriculture, why would he take electricity subsidy, right? So it is there for the rich farmer. Similarly, even the kind of loans which are taken are always benefiting the ones who are already rich and making them richer. So funding the unfunded is also very important, and recognizing the unrecognized. This is when we talk about any benefits of the government scheme or reservation or any such target-based benefits. The aim behind these benefits or these subsidies should be to reach the right audience, okay? So if a subsidy in LPG was meant for people below poverty line, and actually the ones who have fake BPL cards, or the target audience is actually completely different, and the ones who are reaping the benefits is something else, so it defeats the purpose of the scheme and the government initiative, right? So that's what he wanted to highlight, is what I feel. And one very good statement, yeah. The Vice President told that the PM had given the 3-step formula, okay, so that is by him. The other two things which I'm going to tell, one I have already told, is by the VP himself. And one more thing which he said, which I really liked, you can quote that, what is required is, within quotes, bill, political will, administrative skill, and then go for a kill, of the social evil. Bill, political will, administrative skill, and then go for a kill for social evil. Okay, such things cannot come in our minds. We are not acronym makers like the present day government or the creators of such catchy lines. But jahan bhi mile, sun lo aur chipka do. Okay? So that should be your main idea, because writing such things in the mains is always beneficial. See, what I have observed, this was my only mains, and I cannot write again, and I made it my final mains, is what I would like to advise you all, that if you give the examiner something that he reads to enjoy, he likes to read or he enjoys reading, he will definitely give you marks. Ab ghise pete answer likh rahe ho, lambe paragraphs, instead you are using some catchy lines to start your answer, to end your answer in the conclusion, they definitely make an impact. Okay, So these things I'll share with you whenever I find them, otherwise they keep on coming in the newspapers, right? So whenever you read a good article, good editorial where something which is different, okay, some perspective given by any author, maybe a government source or a lot of good people write in Hindu and Express both, just try to encapsulate that. Make a 2 or 3 line summary. If there is a good statement, use it as it is and quote the writer as well, and use it in your answers, because whatever textbook material that we have is often very rigid and not good to read. So वो book में ही ठीक लगता है, but mains answers, they need freshness, okay. They expect a person who is very well aware, well read, who is aware of the current happenings, who knows what is happening in the present society, in the present times, and not somebody who is reading a book which was written 10 years ago, right, and just rememorizing it in his every successive attempt. So just make sure you incorporate these things. ठीक है? Bill. Yeah, so I'll explain the context. He said that the problem today is a lot of bills are being initiated, okay, a lot of policies, bills are being there, when there is actually not much need of it. The need is for implementation and proper implementation. We have almost everything we have, okay, in terms of laws. Like he was giving the example of Nirbhaya case, or I don't know which one specific thing. He said that every time something happens, people come to the parliament and they say that ek bill bana dijiye and there should be a new law, without even knowing whether a law exists or not, okay. So he said the need of the hour is not law making, but enforcement on proper implementation, and that is where the role of bureaucracy comes into picture. So in that context only this bill, for which you require obviously political will, administrative skill where bureaucracy comes into picture, and then go for the kill. ठीक है? तो reforms पे आ जाते हैं. We'll continue the same topic which we were doing in the last class. So firstly we'll discuss the reforms which are required in civil services. So give the heading, reforms needed in civil services. Reforms needed in civil services. Reforms needed in civil services. हाँ तो बताओ, what do you think, what kind of reforms are needed in civil services? You've read a lot about it. We have discussed a lot in the last class. In what areas, यही बता दो, which areas reforms are required? हाँ कहाँ से है ये बात? Behind the pillar, okay. So we can't see each other, but I can hear you. बताओ. Security. Pillar will be very secure. I don't know about your security. So security of tenure, okay. Anyone else? PRP, yeah, performance-based salaries, performance-based appraisals and all, okay. Free from political interference. Your postings and all should not be decided by political class. For what? Postings and all. Okay. Specialist approach, very good. Yeah, a competitive structure and there should not be any complacency in the bureaucrats that hum hi hain. Yeah, he said that. Okay, tenure-based postings or fixed tenures. What kind of geographical biasness is there? Yeah, see, but then that is the idea of all India service, right? You have to serve in a particular state. But the bias was there that people wanted to serve in their own state, right? So for that we have a new cadre policy now. In that I forgot to mention, although it's not official, but some newspapers and some sources had quoted that in future there might be some kind of a fluidity in those zones. The whole idea of creating the zone was maybe in future a person, like for example if I am from zone 1 Agmut cadre, Okay, then there are 5 zones in states within the zone 1. So it might happen that a person who is in Agmut can be sent to Rajasthan or the other state in that very zone which you have opted. So that could be a futuristic reform, but that was not given in the notification as of now. Till date what has been given is 5 zones, and within zones you have your respective states, and within those respective states also you have your preference. Okay. Chalo, I'll tell you, likho, reforms. So we'll divide it into two. First we'll discuss about the reforms in the exam, okay, and then the service conditions. So first give the heading exam. हाँ तो एग्जाम में बताओ कोई चाहिए रिफॉर्म? चार चार दो बहुत कम है. ओके सो वॉट एवर. हाँ ठीक है, राइट डाउन. फर्स्ट पॉइंट, separate exam for specialist services, separate exam for specialist services like IFS, Indian Foreign Services, Indian Police Services, IPS, etc. Forest already has a separate exam, and they only take people with science background, and also they have sufficient safeguards for that aspect, right? Full stop. Shashi Tharoor panel. I hope you have heard this guy's name. Shashi Tharoor's panel had recommended a separate exam. Shashi Tharoor panel had recommended separate exam for IFS, Indian Foreign Services. Second point, as suggested by many, a reform for equal or level playing field, as suggested by many, a reform for equal slash or level playing field could be removal of optional subject. Third point, increase the intake of civil servants, increase the intake of civil servants as pointed out by Basavan Committee, BASAWAN, Basavan Committee report. There is a shortage of 1400 IS officers, 900 IPS officers, and India has only about 800 IFS officers in all. Whereas USA has, any guesses? 70, 17 closer. USA has 20,000 diplomats. हमारे total मिला के serving present retired तो नहीं, but the ones who are presently serving the newly hired मिला के total cadre strength of the service is 800, because every year they are taking only 40-45 people. That also they have increased. Initially it used to be only 10-12. So there is a dire need of foreign services officers also, because post globalization, when a country wants to make its impact on the international level, diplomats are the medium to do that. Okay, so you need to have experts in different domains in terms of diplomats. Okay, so these were the 3 points in exam. Now second heading डालो, service conditions. Service conditions. First point, there is sorry, start with most of the services are, most of the services are generalist in nature. Most of the services are generalist in nature, especially the IAS. And there is need for specialist bureaucrats in areas like environmental talks, WTO negotiations, etc. Right. So what we have seen is that most of the ministries, most of the areas are being dominated by the IAS, right, and a lot of other services also. But most of these services, and especially the IAS, is generalist in nature. Okay, there's a person who is having a graduate background, maybe in any field, has exposure of probably the district administration, but comes into Ministry of Environment and has become the secretary now, with probably no knowledge of environment absolutely, or into Ministry of Finance. So what we need is people who are specialists, because what happens is when we go to environmental talks or climate related talks, it's often seen that the Indian representatives are completely clueless. They had thought of going for a completely paid holiday with their family, but bitha diya table pe to negotiate on behalf of your country. Whereas when we see people coming from China, USA, there is a special, completely different class of people who are coming. They are specialized, they are mostly professors, or academic people who have that kind of background. A person who is negotiating environmental deals for his or her country has to have that kind of knowledge, practical as well as theoretical, right? Only then you can get a good deal on the table, which is lacking from the bureaucracy that we have presently. Similarly, WTO talks, maybe this same things happen, and even though there is an Indian trade services and all, but it's a relatively newer service, and not many bureaucrats have recently been seen doing good work from that service. Whereas contemporary IS, only people have been in these ministries and they are the one who are representing. Diplomats have been doing these works on a very regular basis. Most of them are good, but again, a diplomat can also not be a specialist in every domain wherever he is going for negotiation. Okay, the ambassador of the country may be sitting there and probably heading also a certain negotiation, but then again you need certain people who are experts of that area, which we may be carrying from the private sector or somewhere else, but why not have a specialist cadre for that, right? So this is the first point. Second,
But how can we have special cadres for everyone, like doctors, environmental,
hey, doctors nahi,
trade?
we can create, like for example the Indian trade services. This can be, the service conditions and everything can be improved, and there can be certain specifications or criteria that we can keep when we have a recruitment for this particular service. A separate exam could be there, where people who have economics background or who have worked say for 5 years in trade related matters, they can come into picture. If you are aware,
Hire from TUCS, like Delhi University Economic Department, and send them there for economics.
send them there to theek hai, why not hire there? Why should we spend money on the people?
Already pay them na, because they are in government universities who are like
No,
very
so we send them to best universities, pay them, rather than we hire people who are already working. Then we send them to private sector and ask them to work there 10 years, gain experience and then come back. That's not how it works, wait. So even presently UPSC has certain posts, if you might have read, whenever you go to UPSC website, there is the other service, something kind of other applications wala ek area, ORA or something they write, yeah, other recruitments and all. So there they have a lot of specialist vacancies where you need experience of say 5 years in biotechnology in a very particular specific domain, and a very specialist, probably better group A jobs also at times, jobs which are probably higher than what we are recruited at, they are also present. So that's the kind of bureaucrats we need for certain departments, okay. So having a service which is completely generalist, that is where the idea of lateral entry also actually comes into picture, but we'll discuss that. You want to ask something? Yeah. Louder. What logic? See, whatever, statements that they usually give is, they say we don't want to dilute the quality. Every time the excuse is said that suddenly if we increase from 40 to say 150, there is chances that the quality of the IFS officers that we are getting might get diluted. This is one thing. Second thing is, you cannot just drastically increase the number, because you have to see the entire hierarchy. If you increase the input on one level and the senior batch is having 40 people, the senior one above that has 20 people, then you have to see the promotional aspects of these people also, right? So the entire balance gets disturbed. Suddenly there's a big batch coming of 150. Post to utni hai na, you cannot suddenly randomly create post all of a sudden in one night. So that is also a big problem for the administration side. May not be for UPSC or DOPT as such, but for the people who are allocating. This happens when there is a small state and a lot of IS officers also hired for that or recruited there. A lot of them don't get to serve DM posts because there were not enough DM posts. Whereas if you go to Northeast or in some other these Odisha and all these areas, there are so many DM posts and so few IS officers that even on probation and just after completion of probation, a lot of them are given the charge of DM, right? So that kind of a thing also has to be seen. You can't just bring in a very huge batch after hiring small batches for a long year, a lot of time. So this has to be done in a tapered manner. Okay, so agar 40 hai abhi, they gradually increase, but they are not doing that also. Last year the vacancies were about 42, this 4, now they have actually reduced to 42 ya kuch ho gaya. General wala 22 hi raha. So very minute 1, 2 plus minus they are doing. At least they should consistently start increasing 5, 5, 6, 5, 5, 6, 6, so that maybe by 5 or 10 years later on there is a 60 to 70 intake. Second point. Job safety and complacency job safety and complacency suna hai na term, complacent hona, complacency needs to be removed from the minds of civil servants. Okay, so the entire idea of job security, or the basic, for a lot of people from rural backgrounds, the whole idea of coming into civil services for that matter, or even a government job, is job security. Koi nikal nahi sakta, theek hai? So when you have this at the back of your mind, that even for the removal of PN, the file may go up till secretary, okay, and even he may not be able to do if some political pressure comes in. So if that kind of job security you are having, that you may do any goddamn thing and you know that you will be spared, is wrong, because that infuses a sense of complacency. आप काम क्यों ही करोगे, आपके पास कोई motivation, कोई डर ही नहीं है ना. Like if you work in private sector, there is absolutely no time restriction. You come whenever you want, you go whenever you want, as long as you are finishing the work allotted to you, okay? Hours are flexible, everything is flexible, but there are certain limitations on your work. If your work is good quality, if you're doing your work on time, if you're not, they'll probably give you 1 warning, 2 warning, and then they'll chuck you out. Okay, so that's what the private sector is there. They have this hire and fire policy and they are doing pretty well. Here we have excess employees, okay. In a lot of, especially group C, group D jobs, we have way too many people. And most of them know that they are not in a very answerable position. Even at civil service also this thing happens that at times we feel that even if we don't do the work, or the bureaucrat feels they can at most suspend me, is also, you know, far-fetched thought. Most likely they'll transfer me, okay, and then probably again transfer me. That's all. इससे ज़्यादा कुछ नहीं कर सकते. So that complacency breeds in, which is a wrong thing. So this job security should be taken away, that only the president can recruit you and only the president can remove you. These things should not be there. And if somebody is complacent, or if consistently their ACRs or APARs, what we call now annual confidential reports, are consistently negative, then I think there should be some rule that after 4 to 5 years, that person should be terminated from the service. But again, these ACRs is also very, so these annual confidential reports which are given in this Sarkari setup government mein, your boss will write your ACR or APAR, okay? Now unlike the private sector where they follow all the bell curves and everything, only these many people will get promoted, yeah, everybody mostly gets outstanding. If you don't get outstanding, you get good or very good, your promotion gets stopped. So the whole idea of good was that you're good, very good is very good, and somebody has to be outstanding. But if you don't give outstanding, or you give very good or good, your promotion gets stopped. You may not be given good post and all those things happen. So even that is a very flawed thing. That can also be suggested as a reform. Next point. This is similar to what we just discussed. Dynamic appraisals. Dynamic appraisals. Appraisal. Dynamic appraisals and cross verification of ACRs, annual confidential reports, ACRs. इसको आजकल APARs भी बोलते हैं, but ठीक है. So the idea behind this point is that you should have some kind of a dynamic appraisal. Now what happens is you are into the service, you know, after 4 years my entire batch will get promoted to say under secretary, I'll also be promoted. After 5 years I'll also get director scale, they'll also get that, or deputy secretary, whatever. After 17 years पूरा IS पूरा FS सभी joint secretary बन जाएंगे, हम भी बन जाएंगे. So your struggle starts actually very late. Say after 20 years, you maybe at the time of additional secretary tak bhi also, if you're very senior, they'll make you somewhere or the other. Maybe secretary or some other probably DG post or something you're eyeing on, you might not get if you're not efficient. But then that is a very, very flawed thing, right? Your appraisal and your promotions should be based on the way you're working, your work ethics, how much you're contributing to your work, your whole idea of how you perform, your rapport with your juniors, seniors. A lot of things matter, right? Like you've never seen in army this kind, or the armed forces, this kind of appraisal doesn't go. Whoever performs is promoted, and often they supersede very easily, and those who are not able to get promoted, they are given volunteer retirement, VRS and all, right? But in civil service very difficult, because everybody feels कि हम तो बहुत ही competitive process से आए हैं, हमें तो नहीं निकाला जा सकता. We have slogged and we have cleared such a big exam. So your appraisal, as a suggestion you can give, or on the service condition, that your appraisal should be dynamic, and cross verification of APR means that there should be at least 2 people checking the annual performance report or annual confidential report of an officer. So I may not be in good terms with my boss because my boss asked me to do something which was maybe not right and I said no. He spoils my ACR and I may not get promoted for my next promotion which is due, or I may get a punishment posting or whatever. So there should be at least 2 or 3 levels of checks in the ACR, so that, you know, the honest officers, they should not get affected by all these things. So next point. So like he had also mentioned, performance related pay, PRP, performance related pay and outcome-based promotions are the need of the hour, outcome-based promotions, ठीक है? So a lot of PSUs are doing this from now, but not on a full scale, and central government is not doing it till now, not even state governments. There should be a component of your salary which should be based on your performance, like it is done in private sector also. वो होता है ना, there is this gross fixed and all, हाँ, उसके ऊपर bonus and all रहता है. So whatever CTC they tell you 25 lakhs, 30 lakhs, उसमें lot of it is dependent on your performance. Fixed वाला बहुत कम portion होता है, a lot of it is variable. But in government everything is fixed. Once you enter, you will get, and that salary will just increase and never reduce. So there should be a fixed amount or a certain percentage of your salary or your takeaway that should be decided on your performance. That should be decided on the ACRs or APRs or the gradings that your boss or seniors or superiors are giving you. That should be there because that gives you an incentive to work hard or work less, right? If I know that I'll be still getting the same salary which my other batchmate is getting despite doing just 2 hours of work even when he's logging 20 hours, so why should I work that much, right? And similarly, outcome-based promotions. So if there are tangible goods and assets that are created, work has been done, that is something which should be considered for a promotion. So if, for example, there are 2 DMs and one guy has made some 20 good schools in his district, there has been a lot of infrastructure projects, people are very happy with his performance, there have been a lot of cultural festivals conducted, scholarship for kids, a lot of things on different areas, women empowerment, child care, everything has been taken by this one guy, and there's this other person who has probably no achievements in his district. He was chilling for the 4 years that he was, maybe involved in 1 or 2 riots. So that's all were his achievements. So why not your promotions, your postings should be based on the outcome that you generate. Okay, so that is the basic idea. Next point. अब जहाँ भी भेजें वो अलग चीज़ है, but the basic idea is कि उसको आपको appreciate करना चाहिए और एक difference create करना चाहिए. आप बनाओ यार जो आपको लगे, suggest करो. But personally I would not like to suggest this. अच्छा काम कर रहा है उसको गाँव में भेज दो वापस रूरल, ये तो अच्छा ही कर रहा है इसको क्यों ही लाए. तो फिर ऐसे तो सीएम को पीएम बनना ही नहीं चाहिए. आप तो इतने अच्छे सीएम और पीएम बन के क्या करोगे? आप गुजरात में ही रहो, आपको हम बिहार में सीएम बना देते हैं. वहाँ ज़्यादा डेवलपमेंट की ज़रूरत है. गुजरात मॉडल को बिहार मॉडल में बनाओ, ठीक है? सो नेक्स्ट पॉइंट, political interference. Political interference should be minimized. By fixing the tenure, by fixing the tenure of an officer, and independent postings without any political pressure. So in a lot of areas, the chief secretary is the final say in your promotion, and he usually recommends the postings of DM, divisional commissioner, and all these people. Other departments, they may or may not have such a system. Foreign service is one area, a service where there is very minimal political interference because there is a foreign service board which is headed by the foreign secretary, and he himself decides along with other senior members on who has to be posted where. But in central government and states, there is a lot of problem of political interference. The minister might throw you from one area to the other. So for that, your postings should be relatively autonomous, so that, I mean, there can be a board which is constituted, which is with the senior civil servants or bureaucrat of that area only, and they decide the postings, right? Rather than any political interference. So that kind of a board system like which IFS has would be a better option. And in terms of tenure, for postings where, like, say, important postings, for example, the DM of a particular area, the SP of a particular area, the developmental commissioner or the MD of a certain PSU, these people need some time to actually work, right? You can't just keep changing people in 6 months. So if there are certain developmental goals or aims or visions that the government has and that bureaucrat has, to actually come from paper to reality, it will take at least 2 to 3 years, right? So the tenure should be fixed for minimum 2 years or 3 years, whatever it should be, but there should be some tenure fixed. Obviously, if the officer is indulging into corruption or any such other thing, then in those circumstances, the tenure might be curbed or cut down, but otherwise, in normal circumstances, there should be some kind of tenure safety that should be given to the officers. Okay, next point. Importance should also be given. Importance should also be given to work ethics, and work culture, Self-explanatory point. Next लिखो. Corruption एक छोटा सा हेडिंग डाल दो, एक पॉइंट बना के, उसके अंदर we'll write 2-3 points within corruption. First, strict penalties should be imposed on officers indulging in corruption. They should be immediately suspended and even terminated if the need arises. Full stop. इसी में लिखो. We need to remove the deadwood, DEAD, deadwood / corrupt and inefficient officials for improving the performance of the bureaucracy. ठीक है, इसमें लिखो recently several IRS officers, last year it had happened, recently several IRS officers were shunted, 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 which means removed. Several IRS officers were shunted who had long pending proved corruption charges against them. So there were a number of IRS direct recruits and promotory IRS officers where there were cases of corruption, and a lot of them were asked to proceed on suspension, and they were on suspension for 8-10 years. They had been convicted by the courts, but they were yet existing. In your suspension you get half of your salary. So then the present government took a drastic step and they terminated them from their services, which is a bold decision and something that should be done. Second point in this, Prevention of Corruption Act should be strengthened, should be strengthened should be strengthened to protect the honest officers, to protect the honest officers and penalize the corrupt ones, and penalize the corrupt ones. And penalize the corrupt ones. Okay. So Prevention of Corruption Act should actually be present, but it should not harm an honest officer from doing his or her own work, and at the same time it should not provide a blanket cover. Like there is one section 19 of Prevention of Corruption Act where it says that the civil servants, any kind of conviction for civil servants in the work done in their official capacity, it cannot be done or they cannot be prosecuted unless and until the permission is taken from the government. So such kind of safeguards should be there, but then it should be seen that these safeguards are to protect the honest officer and not to protect the dishonest ones, right? What if the state has colluded with the civil servant himself and the CM may not give permission for the prosecution of such an officer, right? Because a lot of people will be exposed then. So these things should be seen. Alright, so now we'll come to the next topic, which is a long one, but you have test also from 4. We'll start. Lateral entry. Most of them have now. Very few government officials and offices are there now where this fingerprint is not there, and this is also being done. Parliament was one of them, but once the Vice President had come on rounds and at 11 AM nobody was found, a lot of people were not found on their chairs, he got very angry, and so now the biometric system will begin from next month. Apart from that, Home Ministry, Ministry of Railways, most of the ministries have these things. In state government some of them have, but the process is obviously they'll be doing it soon. Government schools don't have it. Obviously, see, the biometric technology is not very cheap, and also there is a lot of maintenance problems also, right? Because often when too many people are using it, wo fingerprint ke saath moisture, dust, a lot of things come in, so it requires regular maintenance. That kinds of funds are also a problem, but at least at bigger offices, ministry level, this thing is being implemented. We can hope that in future it will be brought into smaller offices also. So that is there now. Again, it's not there in state governments, but in bigger offices, e-tracking of files and all is there. So what happens with the file, there's a file movement slip always, okay? Whenever a file goes, it has a file movement slip. So for example, if I have put up a file and I am an under secretary, I'll address it to my DS, who will further address it to my director. And this file goes on, and whenever it reaches a particular office, there is a file tracking system online. The PA of that officer will put it in his system whenever this file was received, and when was it next passed to the next senior officer. So the entire cycle of the file can also be seen. So things like these are being done, but then again they are being done in bigger offices. They might trickle down to the smaller ones in future. Lateral entry. क्या होता है lateral entry? Direct hiring of people without any entrance test. Written entrance test, okay, but maybe they might have one in the future. On the basis of practical knowledge, very good. That is the main point. Direct appointment at higher post. Yeah, that is being done now, but lateral entry could be at any level, right? Specialist, yeah, abhi wahi bol rahe ho na. So specialist, exactly. Specialist is the word here. So we need people who will be hired or recruited for a very specific post for a very specific work with a defined tenure and with probably defined targets also that they have to achieve in that period. And most of them will be on contract basis, right? You came, you've done your work, you were paid your remuneration and now you leave. So that is lateral entry. So we'll discuss lateral entry. Before that, what recently happened lateral entry में? Can anyone tell? हाँ वही 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 पूछ रहा हूँ मैं, क्या हुआ था? Somewhat, somewhat. ठीक है. So what happened was that somewhere around last year, the PMO had asked DOPT to make a circular or make a proposal rather regarding the whole idea about lateral entry into civil services, okay, and lateral entry at senior positions mostly into the government. DOPT was also a bit reluctant because most of DOPT and such ministries are manned by whom? IAS officers. They have a very strong lobby. अब बाहर से क्यों आने देंगे हम किसी को, अपना पत्ता थोड़ी कटवाना है. So they don't want people to come from outside. So the IAS lobby was very reluctant to this whole idea. But then ultimately the PM prevailed. And recently what happened was, in a notification, 10 joint secretary posts were, they came out online, and from different sectors, these 10 people would be entering into the services, not services, entering into the government in particular departments at joint secretary level, okay. Joint secretary is usually the head of a department in a ministry. It's a very, very important and powerful post. It's usually, I think, the JS is the one who does almost everything. So everybody reports to the JS has the decision making power. The AS and secretary above him are mostly the ones who he reports to and tells, okay, ye ho raha hai, wo ho raha hai. But the main work is done by the joint secretary. The main application of mind is also joint secretaries. So it was a bold decision, and let's see what happens. Only interview is being suggested by a special search and selection committee which will be set up to bring in these 10 people from diverse area of private sector. From PSUs or other government sectors also people can come, but whoever is a specialist in that particular domain will be hired for that particular ministry at a JS position. The idea is to infuse new fresh ideas, bring in skills of private sector into the government setup. Also, if certain things which are being done outside in private sector which could increase the efficiency and efficacy of the government, obviously that will also be done, right? So in brief, write the recent proposal, I'll just tell you. Lateral entry heading डाल के, in an apparent bid, BID, to bring in expertise from the private sector, and infuse talent into the country's bureaucracy, the DOPT, Department of Personnel and Training, has invited within quotes outstanding individuals for 10 senior level positions within brackets joint secretary in the departments of economic affairs, comma revenue, comma revenue, comma commerce, and highways among the others, and highways among the others. Next point, as per the notification, as per the notification, the eligibility criteria includes, the eligibility criteria includes individuals working at comparable levels, includes individuals working at comparable levels in private sector companies, in private sector companies, at comparable levels in private sector companies with a minimum of 15 years experience, with a minimum of 15 years experience, of experience besides those working in central public sector undertakings, comma autonomous bodies, central public sector undertakings, comma autonomous bodies, comma statutory organizations, comma research bodies, statutory organizations, research bodies, and universities. So basically 15 years, right? The experience that has been asked is minimum 15 years experience in the private sector. You know how much time does it take to become a joint secretary for IS and IFS and other services? At least 17 years, right? वो भी IS और IFS का fastest है, तो they get probably at 17. IPS it becomes again 3 years slower, and also due to huge batch size of IPS and other services, the person who is at the last of the batch, it might take about 20 to 23 years to get his joint secretary promotion. Also for the other services, the promotions are even slower, so they may reach joint secretary level probably closer to their retirement. Okay, so but in private sector they have given it 15 years, so it may be a tad unfair that, you know, they are coming from outside and they'll be given, I mean, at least their experience should have been more than what the bureaucracy has. But then the idea is that in private sector your growth is very fast if you're very good, right? Your growth is proportional to your learnings and your working skills. So 15 years in private can easily match 30 years of government, easily. Because there are people who become partners of consultancy firms in 15 years, 20 years. Because they are working 22 hours every day. यहाँ तो 10 घंटे काम कर लिया किसी ने, वही बहुत हो जाता है at times, right? So probably that's the idea behind giving 15 years, but again it's a very debated topic because a lot of people feel that it is unfair to the existing bureaucracy, right? One more thing in this. The recruitment will be on contract basis. The recruitment will be on contract basis for 3 to 5 years. For 3 to 5 years. 3 to 5 years. The intake will be made, full stop, the intake will be made in 10 departments initially. The intake will be made in 10 departments initially. But will expand to other categories, in the second phase. No, you cannot. आपने पूछा था ना question, ये किसी और ने पूछा था, okay. So you cannot write short forms in mains exam, and please don't do it. It shows a very casual attitude if you're writing GOV for government and acronyms and all. Even unless until something is very common, right? Don't like write SC for Supreme Court and all that. Please don't do that. वो आप अपने notes में लिख सकते हो. Don't do that in formal answers which you are writing for test series or in your UPSC mains, because the examiner may or may not know. He may know, he'll mostly know, but it shows a very casual approach. You can use acronyms or terms which are very like globally or nationally accepted. For example, NGO you can write, but that also try to mention it once in the full form. Okay, when you are writing, then just write non-governmental organizations, and us time you can write it in NGO in bracket, and then later on you will use NGOs in your answer, but otherwise don't do it. And make it a habit, because once you start to write your answers, because in your notes you have a habit of writing in short form, okay? वो C constitution को C बना के गोला कर दोगे and all those things, okay, which you have learnt. And there are very, short forms which really, it becomes very difficult at times, because it used to happen with me. I used to write that and cut it and then again write it in full. So make this a habit, because that kind of approach will not work, okay? So the next thing, यार कहाँ क्या पढ़ रहे थे आप, क्या पूछते हो बीच में? Completely unrelated.
Sir, second phase, so I did second phase. That's why I answered.
ठीक है, next चीज लिखो. The post of joint secretary, JS, हाँ लिख लो JS. Notes में लिख लो, वहाँ मत लिखना. The post of joint secretary at JS is normally filled by career bureaucrats who join the services like IS, IFS, IPS, IRS, etc. after passing the UPSC examination. Last point, the notification specifies a minimum age of 40 years, and minimum qualification of graduation from a recognized university. But having higher qualifications will be an added advantage. See, what are the ways to enter civil services, okay, or to be a part of government at decision making levels? Is mostly till date it was through two ways. One was direct recruitment, DR, through which we are hired through a competitive examination conducted by UPSC, and we join the grades of one of these services, right? So this is the one most accepted and till date happening system. The second one, which I had mentioned in the last class, is on promotion, okay? So somebody clearing state services examination may be inducted into IS, IPS in the future, maybe, not necessarily, but maybe. Okay, similarly, somebody coming from SSC and these examinations or RRB and all may be inducted into officer levels and may be given the same service at later levels with some or other conditions involved. So they are called as promotees. Okay, often you might have heard this thing कि वो promotee हैं and all that. So promotees कहते हैं उन्हें. Usually when you see a DM at a very senior post who is also an IAS or a DCP who is now an IPS, having almost 50 years of age or 55 years of age. So these guys are usually who have been promoted from lower levels and brought into these services on promotion. So these were the two ways of entering. Now comes the third way, the new twist in the picture, which is lateral entry. ये सीधा ट्रम्प कार्ड है आपके पास, इसको दिखाओ और घुस जाओ अंदर at a good level, right? So this is the third way. Now the whole idea of lateral entry has been debated a lot, and I don't know whether we should have a very strong opinion on either side of the spectrum, but since it's happening, and as students who are preparing for this examination, you need to analyze what are the pros of this step, cons of this step, some committee recommendations and a good conclusion. इससे ज़्यादा दिमाग नहीं चलाना, ठीक है? Although if you rationally analyze, I personally feel that it's a good decision, okay? And I feel that this is a stand that you should also take if it comes to your mains or your interview, because this is the decision of the government, and you wanting to be a part of the government should have a similar stand. अब don't think कि IAS lobby का ये कहना है, वो IAS बन गया ना तो उन्होंने अपनी lobby बना ली, now they can fight for their rights. अभी आपकी तो कोई lobby है नहीं, so you can't do that. Because what I feel and what the general idea is, most of these ministries where this lateral entry has been brought in, आप देखो तो बहुत ही specialized sector हैं ये, financial services, economic affairs, commerce, civil, revenue, civil aviation भी है, agriculture is there, highways, shipping, environment, climate change. The list of 10, it's huge, but there are 10 of them, and they are very specialized. Aviation, climate change, and such areas they require very specific knowledge. Okay, so there's one good news and one bad news. The good news is that the test is cancelled, but the bad news is that you'll have to continue the class till 5. Okay. Chalo, theek hai, now we'll do aram se. Yes. So these were the you're actually right. In fact, okay, good news मिल गई, bad भी मिल गई, अब सुन लो. So what he just asked that why not, I mean, bring in the other services people who are also there in the government and bring them at top levels. This is what you want to say, rather than hiring lateral entry. So I mean, that is also one way which has been suggested by several committees also. One of the pay commissions also said that it is very important, not important, rather this could also be one level or one way to induct people at top positions to break the hegemony of the IAS and IPS and IFS, that people from other ministries or other levels, they can also be brought in, okay? But what happens is that can be done in very few areas, okay? जैसे engineering services वाले हैं, already most engineering departments are somewhere or the other headed by somebody from engineering services. The entire railways is completely manned by IAS officers, the head of which is the chairman railway board, also coming from the same exam. Okay, Delhi Jal Board probably has an IAS officer. There are areas where we can replace these generalists by specialist people, okay? Like, I still don't understand why chairman of NHAI has to be an IAS officer, okay? I don't think he knows anything about highways. Somebody from a technical background, a civil engineer, should be there who has idea of structures. So that is a good thing which can be done, but I don't know, these things happen. But again, that is a small step, because there are few such departments where we can incorporate this. But this is a completely different domain. Like, in fact, what you said, the present chairman of the railway board was previously the CMD of Air India, and previous to that he was again in railways. So a person from railways is going and chairing the aviation sector, that to the national carrier. Air India, which is pathetically doing, I mean the performance is very, very poor. Why not bring in somebody who is a specialist in aviation, right? But now we don't have a person like that in government, right? So that is where lateral entry comes into picture. If you see these 10 sectors, they are very, very extremely specialized. They did not bring in into areas like rural ministry, urban ministry, where we already have IAS officers who have sufficient knowledge, and these are the people who have worked at grassroots level, made policies at state level in their cadres, and they are now on deputation to center and doing the same exactly for the national level. We have brought in areas where we lack technical expertise or specialized domains. Maybe in future we might need people for cyber security, IT, yeah, industry, yeah, industrial revolution 4.0. Okay, so for all these things we might need to rope in the private sector, because they are way, way, way advanced in artificial intelligence and all these technology related things than what we are. Okay, so the whole idea of bringing a person at joint secretary level through lateral entry is firstly to bring in technical expertise from outside. Okay, now a person who is working in aviation sector, say the MD of SpiceJet, or somebody working at a director or chairman level of Indigo Airlines. Now these people, when they come as joint secretary to aviation, they know each and every damn thing what is happening in aviation. They know what is the problem which is being faced by the carriers, because they have been on that side. Now when they come here, they know what is the issue of the regulatory authorities, what exactly can be done, what is being done, who are the officers who actually are doing things in a certain way which should not be done, what kind of red tapeism is there, because in private sector things work fast. Okay, you will not have those file systems, like file आई है, after 3 cup of tea वो फिर बैठी रहेगी, फिर it will go somewhere. So it doesn't work like that. Things are very fast, and that kind of a work environment will also be brought in by them. Okay, so there are multiple things. I mean, just bringing in 10 people or 20 people from outside at certain positions on contract for 5 years, does it actually hurt the hegemony of IAS, or does it, you know, I mean IAS has 100 other things to do. Abhi CAG bhi aap hi ho, all other such post, National Commission, Chief Election Commissioner, you have all ample opportunities to work. So why not bring in specialist people at these posts who are making policies at joint secretary level, where probably an IAS officer would have to, you know, read a lot, go for a lot of foreign trainings at the expense of the government, and will need a lot of help. So why not bring in specialist people at these positions, and the IAS officers and the IPS, they can restrict themselves to district level or state level work. Okay, there is still a lot of things which need to be done at district level, at state level, and that kind of a work. So why not they being involved only in administration of these areas, running about of the entire country, which they do, smooth functioning of law and order, and leave the policy making part to the specialists, the people who have worked in these areas. Not that IAS officers cannot be specialists. There have been instances where people with extremely good backgrounds in finance have become governors of RBI also. D. Subbarao was an IAS officer, and he was an excellent economist as well. So people can do that. But then jahan nahi hai, where you don't have such experts in the services, there is no harm in roping talent from outside. Because if you're honestly an IAS officer, and if you really imbibe or you still have those kind of public service values in them, the ultimate goal is for the nation to benefit, right? And if you can't contribute for that particular area, why not bring in somebody else who can do that better than you, and you can contribute in areas where you have an expertise. In that way we'll be minimizing our own efforts and actually contributing to national development. Okay, so that is the general opinion that most people have, which I also have, and I feel that's a balanced view that you can also have. ONG. Yes, again, so we'll discuss that. इसमें भी checks and balances की ज़रूरत है, because the intention is very good. The intention behind the idea is very good. We don't know whether the outcome will be that good or not, because such postings or such kinds of position-based appointments could be political in nature. Okay, there may be some political influence. There might be some collusion. That okay, today you pay me this much and tomorrow you can your company pays this much of donation or whatever they do to our party, and tomorrow you might come on this post as joint secretary, and then we do your work. Or the private sector only sends their guy and he benefits them. Okay, so all these things can happen, but then why not try it out once? Okay, we have done so many wrong things in our country and nothing has worked out, so why not give this thing a chance? Maybe those 10 people who come, 7 of them do good work. Then the phase 2 can, or the second phase that we are hoping to bring in more people from outside, that can work. They're anyways coming from 3 years only, 3 to 5 years. If you don't work well, or if they are trying to benefit their parent organization, they'll be chucked out. Okay, but at least a pilot run or a trial run type to ho hi jayega na. So write down something now. Yeah. Yeah, this is the kind of stance you should take in the interview. If you say, no, sir, I am a UPSC aspirant, what if I clear the exam and you make somebody else joint secretary or the IS lobby? So that's a very, narrow approach to lead things. This is a very good and balanced view that you should have. Obviously, you won't have much opportunity to say these things or have this view in mains, because mains mein the question is very, very like straightforward. They'll either ask you to support or either ask you to criticize, or they may ask you to just comment. In that third case, you have to support and criticize both. Okay? So refrain from taking any stands in mains. Mains में even if you are asked to criticize, तो जब कर लिया criticize तो last में 3 point positive के भी लिख देना. और जब positive बोला है तो पूरा positive बोलने के बाद, having said this can also be possible. You need to show both sides of the coins हमेशा in mains. Forest में. वो आपकी बात ठीक है, that can be done and that should be done, but that is a reform at exam level, right? Now if I start that process, it will at least take 5 years for me to bring in that. ठीक है, 5 years बाद I start conducting specialized exam for each service. Now it will take 20 years for those people to reach a joint secretary level. तो 25 years तो लग गए ना वो चीज़ करने में. तो immediate step ये है, maybe in future when we do that we won't need people from lateral entry or outside and we'll stop the system, right? But तब तक तो we'll have to do this. Yeah. See, 3 to 5 years, 5 years is an ample of, I mean, it's a good enough time to do something which you want to, right? You can make an impact in 5 years. सरकार को भी 5 साल का ही time दिया जाता है to prove their worth. If maybe the policy needs more working, or if that particular officer has more role to play, they'll give extension for 3 years. Extension is a very common thing. People get extension even at secretary level after retirement. The last foreign secretary, he had retired when he was posted to as India's ambassador to United States. Like 2 days before his retirement, he was brought in as foreign secretary and given an additional tenure of 2 years, right? So these things can be done if you're good enough, and if there is some need of that particular officer in that department. But otherwise, I feel that 3 to 5 years is a reasonable time limit. ठीक है? So why lateral entry is needed? Heading. Why lateral entry is needed? ठीक है, इसमें फर्स्ट पॉइंट लिखो, lack of specialization. Lack of specialization. So it's almost the same what we had discussed, but still you can write some. Most civil servants are generalists and lack the required functional experience and lack the required functional experience. Since civil services is becoming a demanding job, it requires within quotes domain experts. You can give examples of WTO, environment, climate change talks and all. Okay, so this point is clear, we've discussed. Second point, bureaucratic culture. Within this, right, Indian bureaucracy is extremely rigid, and one of the main causes, and this is one of the main causes, of red tapeism and slow progression of administration. Lateral entry could change the work culture. Lateral entry could change the work culture by bringing in better practices from the private sector. Third point, see, the whole idea that bureaucrats are elitist, they are rigid, it is very, I mean, most of them try to follow only the norms, the rules, they'll go by the codes that are prescribed. Also, the attitude is very rigid. The whole elitist idea that they don't interact much with the people, listen to their problems, work upon them, they'll have their own perceptions, their whole idea of superiority, because they know that ultimately that security of tenure only comes into picture. But if we have somebody from outside, okay, if say tomorrow a joint secretary comes from outside and he is made in charge of the ministry of the people from group B, group C, group D jobs who have been working there for the past 25-30 years. Now he will try and infuse a culture which he was working in before, which was to come on time firstly, then to do a certain thing in a certain way, reduction of effort, streamlining things, all those best practices which were being followed in private, they'll be brought in here. And usually what is seen that the private and the outside culture is very flexible. They don't have this all sir wala system, that is completely gone. There is cross communication within the hierarchy. Say a new employee can easily go up to the board of directors and talk to them, or maybe a mid-level employee can be interacting with the chairman and all, which is very difficult in the bureaucratic setup. Okay, you may be working your entire life in the ministry but never get a chance to speak with the secretary. Okay, leave aside the minister. So these things are work culture, which will get better once lateral entry of people from the outside are roped in. Next point. Security of tenure. ठीक है, इसमें वही चीज है जो we had discussed before, but write 2 lines. Career based progression career-based progression, career-based progression, and security of job, has led to an increasingly has led to an highly complacent attitude complacent complacent attitude among bureaucracy, lateral entry could break the monopoly and induce competition among civil services or civil servants. अरे अभी हम bad officers की बात कर रहे हैं ना. I mean obviously the good officers are already there. अभी we are supporting the why it is needed. So when we are talking about that, obviously there is a major chunk of people who are not doing this. उनको targeted है point. जो कर रहे हैं वो तो कर ही रहे हैं ना, उनको थोड़ी निकालेंगे. Right. So the security of tenure is a big problem, like we had previously discussed also. The whole mindset that whatever we do, there is no form of removal for us. But the moment you bring in lateral entry, for the people who are not working, it is a problem now, because they know they might lose their job, or they might lose their plump postings at least to these new people. So they will also try to work harder and better to compete with them. So for example, this joint secretary comes into this Ministry of Commerce, and he is somebody who comes from a very experienced background, and he is doing excellent work. Now the remaining 4 joint secretaries in that ministry, they realize वो एक दिन चाय पे बैठते हैं, all 3 of them, like hey, this guy is doing really good work. He has given some 20 good suggestions. He's moving 25 files a day, and all of them are reaching the ministers. He's approving each and every damn thing which he's saying, and they get a little insecure. Now what option do they have? They can't remove the guy who has already come in. So they also start to work. So the whole idea that we are the only ones and nobody can remove us, that gets a little diluted the moment you bring in lateral entry. And they know that in future also, if this guy continues to do good work and we are not doing, then in the second phase one more JS will come from outside, right? And probably these guys will be chucked out or sent to some other ministry or some other non-good posting. Obviously they can't be removed if they are not working excellently. So this is one area. The next point, 4th point, is shortage of officers. ठीक है, ये इसमें सेम वो बसावन कमेटी वाला जो पॉइंट एक पीछे लिखा था, as it is you can reproduce. I'll not repeat this point. There is a big shortage of officers, and obviously if there are less officers, then also lateral entry can be a good means to fill in that gap which is not being done by UPSC and DOPT. Since there is a lack of officers, there are 900 IPS, lack of 900 IPS, 1400 IS officers. So lateral entry would actually somewhere help to fill in these positions and vacancies. Okay. So that point you can write about the recommendations and how there is a big shortage. Now, see, shortages are all levels. So if there is shortage of 900 IPS officers, these IPS officers, they will be manning the entire law and order and the home ministry at most levels. Okay. So from the say SP level to DIG, DGP level, there will be vacancies somewhere or the other. Now it may not seem like that, because in a certain state there might be more IPS and there is probably 5 people fighting for 3 posts, but in some state there might be a huge vacancy. So overall there is a vacancy and need of officers, right? And if lateral entry or people from outside, or for that matter, see, if you transfer people from government to government, तो वो vacancy तो नहीं fill होती ना. Somebody is coming from some other place, he has wasted that seat. Now if you bring in people from outside, somewhere or the other, slow and gradually, they will fill in that gap. I hope you got it. Okay, now we'll discuss the counter argument. This is also interesting. Why lateral entry should not be there. अभी तक तो हम कह रहे थे कि होनी चाहिए, अब हम बोलेंगे क्यों नहीं होनी चाहिए. Counter argument. See, when you write mains, it is very important. After prelims, you come on to this mode. If I tell you something, you have to tell me what are the positives, what are the negatives, and a conclusion. ठीक है, वैसे ही दिमाग चलना चाहिए. Only then you can get good marks. You should not bother whether this is a good step, whether this is a good scheme. As long as you remember, इसके 5 फायदे थे और 6 नुकसान थे. ठीक है, उसको लिखो, एक conclusion डालो और आगे चलो. That's all you need to do. ठीक है. So यहाँ पे even though I told you what approach you should have or what kind of a thinking you should reflect in the interview, but in mains you'll have to show both sides of the coin. एक side देख लिया, अब counter arguments क्या हो सकते हैं बताओ? Yes, so there'll be a conflict between the selected people from these services and the lateral entry. So that is a very good point and a serious issue, that the kind of fraternity that you expect between the officers, that might not exist. Yes, anything else? Okay, so period is short for them to make reforms. Yeah, so probably they might want to benefit their parent organization from they have come and they might have a bias. Exactly, very good point. They will not have the grassroots level knowledge which IS and other all India services officers possess. हाँ, but then वही experience तो हम बाहर से लाना चाह रहे हैं ना. Government setup का जो experience है working का is not that smooth or something which is exemplary, जिसका आप example दे सकते हो. Again, okay, ठीक है, वो वही वाला point आएगा. The kind of rapport they will have with the juniors and seniors, उसमें थोड़ा problem आएगा. Not maybe in the working style.
So the bottleneck is in the lower level or the lower officer cadre. It's not in the higher officer cadre that issue is prevailing. They are pretty fast in taking decisions.
So that's what you feel. I have seen a lot of senior level JS officers also. The file is pending on their table for 20 days. कभी tour पे चले गए, कभी कहीं गए हैं. Even at level of presidents, you can actually identify that when Pranab Mukherjee was the president, there was not a time when there's a single file on his table which will be there for more than 1 day. Even when the day his wife died, he came to office in the second half and cleared this file work. But in the case of Pratibha Patil, there was a huge backlog always. There was an article by one of his secretaries or somebody, and he had explained that how the different personality of people is also very important. So you may say that some of them, since they are recruited by such competitive examination, they'll be doing very well, but that's not the case with each officer of the senior level. Yeah. Profit motive, yeah. Okay. Fine. So basically you're saying 2 points. One is a transparency issue, that the recruitment may not be transparent, and since UPSC is a very recognized and autonomous body and they are more fit to recruit people as compared to a search and selection committee which will be formed in this case. One thing you're saying this. And the second thing you are saying that, what was the second thing? Profit motive, yeah. So they might not understand the public service obligation that probably an IS officer or IRS, IPS, these guys will understand it better because they have worked at grassroots level. So that could also be a point. All right. Anything else? They'll be gone. Okay.
Won't be able to come because for 3 to 5 years nobody will spoil his career.
Yes. That's a good point, but little bit more can be added. Not many people will come in, one for say 3 to 5 years, a very short period, their career will be compromised. Secondly, the kind of compensation they'll get here will be way lower. A person working for 15 years, already 40 years of age, will be definitely getting more salary than a joint secretary. But again, there are different perks here. Okay, but we are talking bilateral entry should not be there. Counter argument ho raha hai.
So the public services are more inclined towards accountability, but the private services are more towards profit making.
Yes, he has mentioned that. So the basic idea of private sector is profitability or profit motive, which is not the case in government, at least on paper. Yes, very good. Yeah, सारे points cover हो ही गए हैं वैसे. That's a very good thing. The reservation policy that the government has will be very difficult to implement in the lateral entry. Okay, since the basic idea, there is a lot of debate in reservation where it is said that reservation should be there or should not be there. The counter argument why it should be there is that there is very little representation at joint secretary and above post in the reserved categories. It may be there in the lower categories, but not at the higher decision making level body. So the moment you start bringing in people from outside, then again this whole idea of reservation may not be possible, and that will disturb the constitutional mandate. Alright, so likho. First point, All India Services AIS, All India Services AIS and other services provide a talented pool of officers with a wide range of field experience, along with knowledge of ground reality, which will be lacking in the individuals recruited via lateral entry. ठीक है. So first counter argument, like we discussed, that these all India services officers and other central government service officers, they have a very wide range of experience. Okay, they are working on ground level, they are working in ministries, they are head of certain PSUs. I mean, an officer of these services will have had done a lot of postings and missions, which probably a individual from a private sector will not get those opportunities. See what happens in private sector, like if I have a degree in economics, I'll probably be taken by one of the consultancies or say company which works in that domain. After that I might be trained in finance and accounts, and once I'm trained, then I'll be supposed to do that very work for the rest of my life, and that is the skill that I will develop. Say after 10 years I am very good at accountancy, and I will personally also want to do things in that domain, and the company will also want me because I've already been trained and invested a lot, the company has done on me in that particular domain. But unlike that, the civil service is different. An IAS officer may be chief election commissioner also, he may be the governor of RBI, he might have worked in Ministry of Finance, also the district magistrate at ground level, also the CEO of Zilla Parishad. So there is a lot of diversity of work. So whenever you have diversity, even in interview they see if you have a lot of diversity in your resume, you have done this, that, they feel good. Okay, they'll probably mark you more, not because आपने बहुत जगह हाथ मारा है, is because you have experience of a lot of things. You have done things from different domains, you have experiences, you have seen more things, you have more ideas than probably a person who has always worked in that one area. I was reading one of the articles where one senior IFS officer had written that most of them who work in the permanent representative of permanent mission of India in UN and other WTO, UNESCO, all such bodies. A lot of these officers are offered plum postings with big salaries to join in these organizations only after their tenure is over. But not one person has resigned. Rarely somebody resigns because these services give you a lot of opportunity. If you take up one job in UN also, most of these jobs have a lot of paperwork, office work, and not that kind of exposure which probably these services give you. These services, say Indian Foreign Service will make you ambassador in one country, then the next year you're working as an ambassador in some other country, then you're working as a negotiator in WTO, then maybe in UN. There's a lot of diversity, and that diversity is valued by even the officers and by the government also. So this kind of diversity would lack in a person coming from private sector. So we cannot completely, give the reins of the government to such a person. So that is one negative aspect that we have discussed. Second, you will be happy to write this second point. Deter potential aspirants. Deter potential aspirants. So obviously, if we start lateral entry on a huge scale from now, a lot of people who aim or aspire to become IAS, IFS, IPS officers or civil servants may not write this exam, okay, because they'll feel from next year onwards that there is so much hard work that is involved. Why should we go through this route? We'll also work at a good salary in private sector, and later on when we are tired working there, we'll also come at joint secretary and above level and work in government. What's the point of, staying in a place like Karol Bagh, eating shitty food, working for 20 hours for 3 years, studying so hard, and then coming in an exam where the career progression is also now not fixed because people from all different parts, different organizations can come in at any point of time. So this will be a disadvantage to the aspirants, to the people who are working so hard, but more importantly to the government, because UPSC has been lucky, we can say, that they have a pool of a lot of talented people. 11 lakh people, the best of the country, is fighting for these posts, okay. So they can never say we never had, a good lot of people coming in. But this may be the problem when you deter the good aspirants. The people who will not be affected are the ones who are not serious anyways, okay. Unko nahi farak padega, and those are the ones which they also don't want. But the serious people, say a person coming from IIT, IIM background, okay. Now that person who really wants to do something for the country has one motivation, that he'll join the services and he'll work hard to reach the top of the ranks, okay. But when you bring in lateral entry, you deter this guy, okay. Now this guy refrains himself from writing such a competitive exam when he already has a placement of say 1 crore in some multinational bank of Singapore or Hong Kong. Now that person will not want to come back to the country, write an exam where already now he also knows that maybe he can come back after 15 or 20 years. So the good talent will be affected. Now the people who have other opportunities, say a doctor who wants to come into civil services, will think probably now my career is anyways better and this is not a step further, I should stay here only. Same with good engineers, same with good other people who are from different academic backgrounds. So UPSC, who has a habit of, who has this trend, I once read the UPSC chairman said that we design the prelims paper in such a way to reject and not select, okay. So the idea behind making the paper is to reject the people. We have to take 10,000 from 10 lakhs who fill the form. So obviously the idea cannot be to make a paper to select more people. It has to be on the basis of rejection, because there are people who are working extremely hard. UPSC also has to work extremely hard in designing a paper which is to reject. So now you will not have a good enough pool of people to reject from. So आप क्या ही करोगे? Okay. So इसमें लिखो lateral entry. Lateral entry would prevent talented candidates to prepare for the tough UPSC Civil Services examination, and would incline them to take up lucrative private jobs. Lucrative, Lucrative, lucrative private jobs. ठीक है. Third point, affirmative policy. Affirmative policy, AFFIRMATIVE, affirmative policy. क्या होता है affirmative policy? Affirmative action, reservation. Yes. So write down lateral entry would impact the constitutional reservation provided for SC, ST and OBC candidates. SC, ST and OBC candidates. ठीक है. तो like somebody had pointed out, reservation will become a big problem then, and immediately if it starts to disturb the balance between these communities, somebody or the other will approach the Supreme Court, and there is a high chance that this could get quashed, right? Because there is a constitutional obligation of the government of the day to fulfill the policy of reservation or affirmative action, which is to bring in people from the depressed communities or classes into mainstream, right? And the whole idea behind lateral entry is merit or talent. People who are from extremely good academic backgrounds working in, you know, high profile jobs. So then to maintain, if you try to maintain reservation or give quotas there, then it will somewhere or the other negatively affect the quality of people coming, okay? And then it defeats the purpose of lateral entry. Now we were hiring people from outside because they were specialists in certain domains. But now within the specialists, we start to throttle them on the basis of, or stratify them on the basis of reservation. Okay, these are 3 good people and we feel, okay, no, but this one is the best, but he's not from reserved category and we need to have a 5:5 ratio or something like that, 1:1. So we'll take this second one. So somewhere or the other you'll be compromising with the merit. But at the same time it is very important because it's a constitutional obligation that you have to fulfill the reservation. So there will be a dichotomy. Okay, so that is one problem that we have now also addressed. Next point likho. Conflict of interest. ठीक है. Now private candidates working in government of India could have a conflict of interest situation with their parent organization. Okay. So for example, I have been working for the past 20 years in Reliance Power plant or Adani Group, and now I am made the Joint Secretary Power. Okay. So however unbiased a person, however ethical a person I am in real life, there will be major conflicts of interest. Okay. Somewhere or the other that individual might favor the organization that he has come from. He may have certain inclinations or likings towards some group of companies. He may have been rejected in the past by some company for a senior position, or he may have his own perceptions about certain organizations in the power sector, and he may work accordingly. Okay, so there is an inherent conflict of interest. You have brought in a person who has worked 20 years in that sector from the other side of the table, and now he is on this side of the table. He will have certain, biases, certain kind of inclinations, which may not always be there, but even if it is there in the slightest of the case, it will be a problem. Because in the bureaucracy that we have at present, even though there is nexus between the IAS officers and these organizations, all that exists, but that is at a very different level, okay. It's not that these officers have had worked in the past with these organizations or have certain kind of affinity with them. Still they end up in making nexus. So what about a person who already has a strong bonding with these organizations, worked in them? He may have certain kinds of, so that problem might arise, that conflict of interest will always be there. So it is advisable that maybe somebody from that particular sector should not handle, or his conflict of interest should all be declared in the beginning itself. We'll be discussing this topic in ethics also, how to resolve the dilemma of conflict of interest. So for individuals who are coming from such an organization, they should initially declare where all they have worked, which all companies they were previously on board members as, or maybe are still, part-time directors, and accordingly they should be hired, right? Next point, salary compensation. Salary compensation. In this, right, the government of India will not be able to provide similar compensation packages and perks given by private sector at senior levels. ठीक है? So we often say that there is this pay divide between private and government, but often we also feel that the government is also paying more and they have a lot of perks. But usually what happens, at starting level the government is paying a lot, okay. Say a person who has cleared UPSC or some even SSC for that matter will be earning 50-55,000, okay, in hand. But somebody who is starting as a software engineer in TCS will be having a 4 lakh package, 3 point something, वो पता नहीं कितने सालों से 3 point ही है वो, okay. So TCS doesn't account for inflation apparently, so 3 point वाला package or 4 lakh का package, but that is at the entry level. Your progression in terms of compensation will increase marginally in government sector, but it will increase exponentially in private sector. After 15 or 20 years, if somebody is doing extremely well, becomes a partner of a company or some organization, director or head or whatever, his pay compensation will definitely be touching crores, okay. Whereas here, the joint secretary might be earning say 1.5 lakhs per month in hand, and his driver may be getting 60, 65 because he has had a lot of experience, 70 maybe, that's also possible with bonus. So your salary compensation at higher levels is very low in India, okay. Despite the perks and facilities and everything that you get is understandable, but for a person like he had mentioned to leave his job in the private sector for 2 crores, 3 crores ka package and coming to government sector for 3 years and 5 years trying to make a change at 1/10 of that salary, and then again going back where now he will not be recognized in the same way like he was before, or maybe his value might increase or decrease. It's a subjective thing. He left one job, and whenever you leave a job it is difficult to get a job, especially at senior levels, because you can't just accept any compensation or any role. There has to be very defined domains where you can work. So this is something where we may not be able to hire the best pool or the best set of people that we are wanting, the experts that we are wanting in these 10 sectors, say agriculture, aviation, climate change. Now for example, say somebody from Greenpeace, an NGO, or in any other organization, somebody working in some UN body related to environment, earning in huge numbers, we call that person to work as a joint secretary in Ministry of Environment. First, so he'll be bugged up with the entire setup that the government process has. Secondly, when he'll get his salary slip, we won't be able to acquire the best talent at the remunerations or the prices that we are paying. So we will again be settling with people who are maybe good but definitely not the best. ठीक है? So then why not bear with the good people that we already have? ठीक है? थोड़े बहुत तो हैं अपने पास भी अच्छे लोग, उन्हीं से काम चलाओ. So this is again one drawback. Then the last point you can write: conflict with the existing bureaucracy. Conflict with the existing bureaucracy. So like we had discussed before also, these lateral entry people will be really disliked by almost all sections of the bureaucracy, because these people come from a section which has not been recruited through the same examination, okay? And these lobbies are very strong. If one IAS officer will not like you, there is a high chance most of his batchmates will not like you, and so on. ठीक है, ये होता है. I mean, they might fight against each other for plum postings, but as a lobby, these services are very strong, okay? When it comes to their service or dilution of their powers and authority, they will fight. And they are the steel frame of the country. It is difficult to, not work in harmony with them. You have to somewhere adjust to their needs. So now this conflict will arise, and this will be disturbing for the person who has come from lateral entry, because the seniors are IAS officers, additional secretary, IAS, IFS, IPS, यही होंगे, and juniors वो होंगे जो इनकी सुनते हैं. So ना subordinates आपकी सुनेंगे, ना superiors आपकी कहेंगे. So you are stuck in between trying to change the world, especially your country. So it will become very, very disturbing for this officer who left his lucrative job trying to come here and do something or contribute, because the kind of camaraderie that is expected between the officers will be missing, because he is not one out of them as per the other class of officers who will believe. Okay, so इसमें लिख लो, this could lead to disturbing the harmony and unity of officers. The harmony and unity of officers which will ultimately negatively affect the administration. ठीक है, आप एक हेडिंग डालो रिपोर्ट्स करके. We'll discuss some of the reports and what they had said, who had supported, who had rejected, where did this idea come from, in very brief. ठीक है, हेडिंग डालो रिपोर्ट्स. इसमें फर्स्ट पॉइंट लिखो, फर्स्ट ARC रिपोर्ट 1965. First ARC report 1965 mooted the idea, MOOTED, mooted the idea of lateral entry in civil services for specialist jobs. ठीक है, तो फर्स्ट ARC से बेसिकली आइडिया आया था, बट बैक इन 1965 तो कोई सोच भी नहीं सकता था such a thing. It was probably way ahead of its times. So that was the source of it. Then next point लिखो, the sixth pay commission. It suggested two mechanisms. for infusing competition, along with filling of vacancies, for infusing competition along with filling of vacancies. First point, opening up senior management cadre, management cadre to all services, and to break the hegemony of IAS, break the hegemony of IAS, या superiority लिख दो, of IAS. B point इसके अंदर, lateral entry of private individuals into civil services. ठीक है, तो इसमें दो बातें हैं, like one of our friend had also mentioned before, rather than bringing people from outside, Sixth Pay Commission also felt that if we can open up the other services, or people from other not all India central services or different services, to come up to these ministries at top positions and break the hegemony of IAS. Okay, now say a person from Indian Audit and Account Service can maybe never become CAG. That is the hard truth. Okay, he'll never get to become Comptroller Auditor General of India, which is invariable in IAS. Similarly, in other domains also, the top positions are reserved for IAS. So why not bring in, and even the Joint Secretary, Additional Secretary posts are also manned by them only, or other elite services, and not the ones, say, Indian Postal Service, Indian Railway, or Telecom, and all these services. These guys don't get to serve at the top of the other ministries, maybe at their ministry only. So why not open up these cadres for people from other ministries also? They can also come at the top position, right? That is one way which the Sixth Pay Commission suggested. And the second, they said also lateral entry could be a solution. Okay, so firstly, use the existing pool of talent from the other services, and if say somebody has a good economics background in the Indian Revenue Service, or maybe somebody is an expert in operations related issue in Indian Railways, then why not bring him to the central ministry in PMO at a plum posting of Joint Secretary or something like that, rather than hiring a person from lateral entry. Okay, so this should be the first approach. If still we have vacancies and still the work is not being done, then lateral entry could be the second way out. Okay, so this was the basic idea of some of the reports which were there. Now internationally also we can see what has to be done. Okay, what is being done and what we should do. So international practices, ek heading dal do. International practices. So globally what happens, that there are two types of civil services. I had explained it in last class. One is the career based services and the other is position based services. Career based services, which is existing in India, South Korea, Japan and all these countries, is where you are recruited through a competitive exam at the entry level, and you and your batchmates only, or that group of people, will completely progress in that government setup and head that particular ministry or services for which you were hired, right? So recruitment is at the initial level only, and these people completely control the bureaucracy of the government, or they are the bureaucracy of the government. Now the second type is position based. That is prevalent in USA, some parts, some positions are in UK also, and many other countries, where you are hired for a particular position. Okay, so you may see that a lot of people in US are, I had given the example of Donald Trump, where he just randomly hires somebody, then fires somebody, and most of these appointments are on position based, right? You may be a district attorney judge in the United States, in one of the federal states, and maybe you leave that job and then you start your own corporate law practice. After 10 years, you again decide to come into the thing and you target a particular position and you get hired to that position. Because there is no underlying bureaucracy or other people who are waiting in the queue to come at that position. Whoever is best for or best suited for that position, having that kind of skills, will be brought in. So this is position based services, okay, where you are hired for a particular position for a particular time frame, depending on the requirements of that service, depending on the specialization and the skills that you possess. On the contrary, the career based service, you are just hired and now the government will decide what kind of, the learnings that you should have, what kind of experiences you will have to be given after these particular tenures or experiences which other posting that you can have, but the set of people will be the same only, okay. So इसमें थोड़ा सा लिख लो. First is career based service. Career based service. India, Japan, South Korea, Spain, etc. have this form of services. They have a fixed career progression. They have a fixed career progression and are recruited via competitive exam at the entry level itself. Second point, position based service. Appointments at senior position are based on post to post basis, post to post basis, depending on the qualifications, post to post basis depending upon the qualifications and the skills possessed by the individual, ठीक है. So by bringing in lateral entry, we are actually trying to merge the two. We already have a career based service and we want to bring in the position based service also at senior levels, okay. So it may become a disaster, but it may also become the best of the two. We already have a good bureaucracy working at grassroots level, at mid level, also at the senior and super senior level, but somewhere in the middle we bring in experts who can contribute because they have technical experiences related to those fields, okay. Now some conclusion and suggestions that you can give. Suggestions. Now these things you can write in the end. First point, reforms like these should be based on consensus. Else they could lead to dissent, D-I-S-S-E-N-T, dissent among the masses. ठीक है. Second point, limited entry could be done for specific projects or missions. Limited entry could be done for specific projects / missions. Example, Nandan Nilekani. Who is Nandan Nilekani? वैसे Infosys. So he was brought in for UADAI, जो Aadhaar mission. So Nandan Nilekani. Nandanilekani. Nandan Nilekani. Okay. So if this kind of lateral entry is there, say a certain person has been brought in to the aviation ministry specifically for the Udan project. So he came, the Udan project is now over and now he's done, he's gone. Okay. So he has a fixed targets that he has to achieve. He knows why he is there for. He knows what he can contribute for that mission and how much he has to contribute. Similarly, the existing bureaucracies also, they know that this guy has come for this purpose and then he'll be gone. Okay. So from both the ends, it's a win-win situation. If it is more as per the project based or specific work based. Now you just randomly hire 10 joint secretaries in 10 ministries and don't know what work they need to do, will be a stupid decision. Rather than before hiring them, we hire them for a special purpose. As it is, they are not going to be there for 10-15 years. They will be there for 4-5 years only. So for that tenure that they will be serving, they should have a defined career path, a defined project or a mission that they are there for, and after that they will leave once that is complete. So in that case, they may leave early also if the project is done early, or they might need an extension of a year or two. Okay. Last point. Even civil servants should be allowed to work outside the government, in private sectors on deputation for a fixed period. है कि नहीं? I mean, it makes sense. If they are allowed to come and work in the government, why can't we go outside and have some different kind of experience and work the private, work as per the skills, work as per the climate of the private sector and learn those things. So it should be both ways. Special appointments or special deputations should be allowed for say 5 years or 4 years in very established private organizations or non-governmental organizations for existing bureaucracy only. Okay. So this was done. Most likely in the next class, we'll be doing the amendment to the NGO Act, corporate social responsibility and e-governance. Okay. Thank you. Lateral entry क्या? जब बहुत सारे हो जाएंगे तब प्रॉब्लम होगी. 10 में तो नहीं फर्क पड़ेगा, और जब बहुत सारे होंगे तो हाँ लॉन्ग रन में हो सकता है. एक सेकेंड. यहाँ रख दिया. हाँ दे दो.